Welcome, everyone, to the latest edition of the StateScoop Government Technology Webinar Series, sponsored today by Dell EMC. I'm your host, Jake Williams, StateScoop's Manager of Strategic Initiatives. Today we take a look at mobilizing the government workforce, and we'll explore how state and local agencies are using mobility to make government employees more efficient. We're going to talk about more than just telework, and instead about where mobility is going and how government can move from a challenge to an opportunity when it comes to mobility. Joining us today are a few state IT thought leaders who've tackled some of these issues and have agreed to share some of the key lessons that they've learned along the way. I'm pleased to welcome Suzanne Pauley. She's the director of eMichigan for Michigan's Department of Technology Management and Budget. Suzanne oversees eMichigan's efforts to develop, design, and execute Michigan's digital imprint. Welcome, Suzanne. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks.
Also joining us today is Keith Werner. He's the Chief Information Officer for the state of North Carolina. Speaking with him today as well is Billy Hilton, the state's Director of Digital Services. Both Keith and Billy are leading the consolidation of North Carolina's information technology into the new Department of Information Technology. Welcome to the program, Keith and Billy. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Jake, and thanks for having us.
Thanks, Jake. Hi, everyone.
And finally, we have Mary Ellen Bazzelli. She's the State and Local Government Strategy Consultant for Dell EMC. Mary Ellen is an industry strategist and an advisor with many years of experience across the state and local IT community. You can find a link to her recent podcast, StateScoop did with Mary Ellen, in your resource library on the console. Mary Ellen, thanks for being with us.
And thank you today, Jake, and thanks for emphasizing my many years of experience.
all good years. Don't worry, Mary Ellen. All very good years. So I also want to welcome our audience, including those joining us live today, as well as those tuning into the archived on-demand edition of this program. And of course, I'd like to also thank Dell EMC for sponsoring our program today. Before we begin, I just want to help our audience get familiar with our console and how they can participate. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple application widgets that you can use. If you have any questions for our presenters during the webcast, go ahead and click on the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your question. We'll try to answer as many of these during the live webcast as we can, either during the presentations or toward the end of the program. A copy of today's slide deck will be available in the resource list widget. That looks like a green folder at the bottom of your screen, and you can expand your slide area by clicking on the maximize icon on the top right of the slide area, or by dragging the bottom right corner of the slide area. If you have any technical difficulty at all, please click on the Help widget. It has a question mark icon and covers some common technical issues. And finally, an on-demand version of this webcast will be available approximately 1 day after the webcast for up to 90 days. It can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier. So if you have colleagues who might benefit from today's presentation, share your link with them, and we'll get started here. Suzanne, you've been working on some innovative ways of making Michigan more mobile. Tell us about your experience and a few of the big takeaways you've learned from your work with eMichigan.
Absolutely. So just kind of a little bit of background on Michigan. We are a centralized IT department, so Department of Technology Management and Budget actually manages technology for the all state agencies and offices. So as Jake had mentioned, what I thought we could do is to kind of do a brief rundown of what we've seen as far as growth of the mobile workforce in Michigan, and then kind of talk about some of the cool use cases that we have going on. So to start us off, mobility at the state. So today we have about 15,000 mobile devices issued to workers, and what we've seen is that's about a 94% increase over the last 3 years, and we have no reason to believe that it's not going to continue to grow just as quickly, so definitely trying to get ourselves prepared for that. All state devices have mobile device management on them. We currently have just switched to Microsoft Intune, and what that allows us to do is provide security and enforce things like strong passwords, which drives us all nuts, the 5-digit password with the weird characters and the numbers and the all that fun stuff, but it's definitely for the security. Through MDM, we can also do things like downloading a full suite of their productivity apps, so we can have PowerPoint and Microsoft Word and Excel on there. And then we also have what we call a Michigan App Store, which is really handy. So the applications that we want to push out to our employees and have them download right from their state device, we can do that through the Michigan App Store. We've also recently introduced a BYOD program, Bring Your Own Device. We currently have about 8 agencies participating in that pilot, so that's going really well. So that's kind of the state of where we are. What I thought was we could kind of take a stroll through some of our use cases. So on this next slide, you're going to see a video launch, I hope, and it's I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our Michigan State Police and their mobile posts. here in Michigan, we've closed most of the posts, so troopers now work almost exclusively out of their vehicles. So hopefully this is going to start when I push this. Just a caveat, this is a marketing video. It shamelessly promotes DTMB. So let's see.
We at the Michigan Public Safety Communications System provide communications for roughly 1,490 public service, public safety agencies. The state police came to MPSCS in 2011 when they introduced the regional policing plan. The state police's intention was to decrease the number of brick and mortar offices they had by about half. So the goal there was to move the troops into a mobile office environment into their vehicles.
DTMB came together with our information technology folks, with our public safety communications folks, all because the whole idea was to get computers, radios, radars, everything those troopers were going to need in the vehicle.
It really truly is a mobile office now where I don't need to go into a building in order to get the work done that I need to do. I can do all of that right from the car.
They now have the ability to use Wi-Fi, to use connectivity in the field and do their job.
Running file checks, running criminal histories on suspects, all that can be done right from the car now. Whereas in the past you would have had to drive to a building and sit at a desktop computer in order to do that.
And DTMB had a big part in that, is we had to get the vehicle for them that had the ability to even install this equipment in.
There's all kinds of technology in the vehicle these days, you know, be it the radar, the video camera system, the in-car computer, or the police radios. And all of that is maintained by DTMB. It's serviced by DTMB. When they have a problem, we call DTMB, and they're right on it about getting the problem fixed or addressed.
Keeping the state police on the road and increasing efficiency overall within Michigan public safety it's very rewarding, to know that what you're doing is keeping people safe, within your state, within your local.
So that was a little bit about our Michigan State Police posts and some of the work we have going on to really turn those vehicles into a mobile office for them. And while we're on the subject of criminal justice, we have another application that we have rolled out to our Department of Corrections staff. And what this does is allows agents to use their mobile phones to look up inmate information and update their case notes. So this is while they're kind of working throughout the facilities that they're able to actually do this on their mobile devices instead of having to go back to a central office within the facility and kind of transfer their handwritten notes over to the computer. It saves them a ton of time. And they found this really helpful. So in addition to looking at helping specific agencies, we've also been looking across our enterprise services to figure out what we can do to kind of touch all state employees and help make their work a little easier when they're not specifically in their office. So this next video is taking a look at our new, what we call Inside Michigan. It's a state intranet site for all state employees, and it kind of gives a little intro into what that allows us to do for our employees. Okay, that video is not coming up when I click the next slide. Here we go.
State of Michigan employees are responsible for the health and prosperity of nearly 10 million Michiganders, collectively carrying out missions as diverse as the residents you serve. In order to focus on your task at hand, you need quick and easy access to services that support your role. Services such as technology, phones, purchasing assistance, facilities, and much more. The new Inside Michigan provides you with access to the information you need to access these services quickly, allowing you to get what you need and get on with your day. Built from the ground up, the all-new InsideMichigan.gov has been designed for the modern and mobile state employee. Employees will now be able to access Inside Michigan from any internet-connected device without needing VPN access. Let's say you're on your way to a meeting in downtown Lansing but aren't familiar with the building. You can now quickly and easily visit Inside Michigan on your phone or tablet and find where you need to park. where to eat lunch, or even find a picture of the building to help you find it when you get close. For those of you who work in the field, finding contact information for a colleague has always been difficult. Now you'll be able to quickly search for that colleague who helped you, even if you can only remember their first name. When the unfortunate happens and you need to contact the DTMB help desk, you can now visit Inside Michigan and check the current wait time before you call. The new Inside Michigan is optimized to serve your digital workspace, offering a host of tools you need to function in today's work environment. You now have the ability to send a presentation to a colleague from your desktop at work, access and review their changes from your iPad at a field office, and practice the presentation from your home computer. But this is just the beginning. Inside Michigan will continue to evolve and improve as technology changes and input is received from users like you. Future improvements to the site will make the experience more personal to you, recognizing what department you work for, in what building, and what content is most important to you and your job.
So that was a little bit about our new intranet site. I find it very useful for finding lookup information for employees because my cell phone contact list isn't as robust as it should be. So sorry, I got a little out of order with my slides, so I'm just going to go back and show you because this is actually something that's really cool. I think so. So the last use case I have is actually an application that hasn't rolled out yet. It's something that we are planning to roll out in January. It'll be available on our Michigan App Store for state employees, but it's also something that our leadership has a very vested interest in. And what it allows us to do is take our enterprise project management portfolio data, all of our projects throughout the entire state, and draw that data out of that enterprise system and then actually present it in a mobile application on a device. So it allows us to look at portfolio level information. So what you're seeing on the screen is just some snapshots out of it. So you can see the first one, the executive briefing, that is a list of projects that our governor has said is very important to him. And it shows him things like spend by month and quarter. And he can dive in and look at all of the list of applications that or projects that are within that portfolio, and then actually take a deeper dive and look at the project level detail, you know, statuses and milestones and budget and all of that fun stuff. So that is actually something that we're rolling out as well. So get back on track there. Okay, obviously I'm not good with pushing the buttons, Julie. So just to summarize in the end, the future of workforce mobility. You know, we do have a changing workforce, you know, a newer generation coming in. The focus is more on the workforce and not just the workplace. So some things that, you know, we're seeing, and I've done a little bit of research in this area of, you know, well over 50% of workers are working outside of the office at least part-time. And when they're doing that, they're actually using multiple devices a day. You know, for example, for me, I have 2 smartphones, a couple of tablets, a laptop, and all that fun stuff to try and keep tabs on. So I'm definitely using multiple things, you know, to get my job done every day and as I move around. And there's no reason to think that that's just not going to continue. And, you know, I think that the growth is going to continue to be exponential. And, you know, as that growth happens, you know, we need to find ways to kind of stay updated and current and making sure that we have the right tools in place to meet those needs. So that's just a little bit about Michigan. And I will turn it back to Jake.
That was awesome, Suzanne. Thank you so much for doing that. I love hearing what you guys have accomplished in Michigan, and it sounds like you've got some really exciting work on the horizon with that app that's coming out in January. So that's awesome. So Keith, Billy, let's turn to you. You might be seeing something similar, or maybe even slightly different. I guess the only 2 options there in North Carolina, especially with the consolidation underway. Tell us a little bit about your experience there and what you've learned from that.
So our digital transformation actually started with the new administration. So there was a couple of early findings with that whole transitioning activity. One was, how do we become more efficient and how do we kind of optimize and modernize our IT across the state, which really led to subsequent legislation that created the new Department of Information Technology. But also one of the key findings I think they found was that there was a very inconsistent user experience with all of our websites. They weren't mobile friendly, mobile ready. There was a lack of a common look and feel, lack of a branding. exercise. And, ultimately the governor came out and said, doing business with the state should be as easy as checking scores on your smartphone or shopping online. So really we anchored to that. And as we opened up our Innovation Center, the flagship project that was started was our Digital Commons project. And luckily we've had just tremendous leadership in this digital space, headed up by Billy Hilton. And I'm going to turn it over to Billy to kind of walk us through.
Thank you, Keith. Great to be with you. So to echo some of those comments, the vision was, a more consistent, citizen-focused, modern web and digital experience. We wanted to refresh and reconceive our web presence for the 21st century. And so several challenges, information architecture, branding, user interface, analytics, accessibility, things like this traditionally had not been factored in to the site development process. And frankly, not a whole lot of collaboration and coordination between the agencies from a content management standpoint and site development standpoint. Certainly not mobile optimized. I believe as late as 2012, we had maybe one site that was responsive, not so well, nc.gov. So the solution, the Digital Commons program, was built on a multi-site Drupal-based platform. So again, that goal of being more consistent, user-focused, and we understood pretty early on that it wasn't just about several templates and different, getting consistency from a look and feel across many different systems. We really needed a modern, flexible platform that could be used and shared across multiple agencies. So Digital Commons started late 2014. We ultimately migrated maybe 8-10 of our cabinet agencies to the platform. And mobile was factored in from the very beginning. So we like to say it was a mobile-first approach. There were breakpoints built into the architecture and our default theme that our sites are based on. So these breakpoints optimize for the phone experience, for tablet, and for desktops. And certainly analytics was a big part of this. Now, we know analytics is a great way to get information about what our citizens, what our users are seeking on our websites and in our digital experiences and applications. What we discovered was, number one, we saw a 170% increase in mobile traffic on nc.gov from May 2015 to May 2016. To Suzanne's point, it's exponential growth. Just this morning I checked, about 25% of our visits on nc.gov were in a mobile context just this past month, so both phone and tablet. So for November, looking at about 300,000 users ballpark and about 600,000 page views. So 25% of our users were in a mobile context there. So analytics. Now, this is kind of interesting to me. So analytics provides valuable clues not only about our end users who are citizens across the state, but this has also been a great way to understand what our state workers, what our workforce is seeking. So we consistently saw during the Digital Commons project that our employee directory kept showing up in the top 10 of page views. So recently, it landed in at number 6, and some other state employee resources rank high as well. So although the redesign and the nc.gov kind of re-architecture was about the citizen, we also said, let's not make the employee directory an afterthought. This is something important to our staff. Let's put some thought into that. So as an example, hopefully you can see on the screen, you've got the full width of the directory on the left and the phone on the right. On the left, you can see more of the traditional horizontal kind of mouse clicking through tabs approach of the directory to enter last name, first name, and the agency. And then on the right, more of a mobile context. In fact, as you find the user you're looking for, we're presenting sort of a digital business card view that is also optimized depending on the device that you happen to be on. A couple other mobile web examples. Our state HR site has a calendar for employees, and we thought, let's not do the traditional grid approach for the calendar, but again, start with the mobile-first approach, and we're using sort of a card metaphor for, as you can see in the screenshot on the left, in a phone view. You can easily swipe to move through events. So took that mobile approach and thought, with this exponential growth, let's go ahead and optimize for mobile users first. Same with our IT service catalog on the Department of IT's website. Then finally, we have also our job-seeking site that, again, just so important to be in a mobile context as well. We've got a new budget transparency site that launched recently. So this is our open budget program. And to me, just another nice example of not only a good collaboration between cross-agency teams, but different ways we've optimized for mobile the best we could, depending on what system and environment we're in. So users go to openbudget.nc.gov, and that's a responsive website delivering content and resources around information around grants and budget information and so on. As you drill into the actual the data and the data viewing experience, there's a responsive web and a native app experience as well. All right, guys, I'm going to switch gears and talk a little bit about Office 365. Now, Office 365, of course, allows state employees to work from anywhere and any device securely. We saw with the start of our program, we first moved mail to the cloud. Next came SharePoint. We saw the rapid growth of many team sites and traditionally a lot of document management happening with these team sites. Over the past several months, maybe 6 months to a year, as there have been new updates to the products within the O365 suite, and our governance committee and user groups have really socialized the productivity gains that are now available, specifically in a native, in a mobile context. We've seen a lot of growth and a lot of improvement with, again, with productivity in a mobile setting. So, for example, PowerPoint. If I'm on the go, I can now pull up my presentation. You can see in kind of an iOS horizontal view and actually do a little bit of work, not just swipe through slides, but make a few changes. I get back to my office, and I've saved my work in OneDrive. I've moved all my files, let's say, for example, from my local machine to OneDrive. So that file I was working on, I've saved to OneDrive. I get back to my office, pull it up on my desktop, and I can continue my work. And kind of jumping back a slide, you can see, for example, that at least for me personally, it wasn't until I obtained most of all of the apps available for a native context did it really kind of have that little epiphany moment of, wow, once you're bringing all of the products together, you really see the benefits with your full workflow. And I think, again, the past several months, many folks have had that same experience. So before we move on, I want to give one more example. I got a story recently I thought I'd share just really briefly. Several of you may know that during North Carolina has been hit by Hurricane Matthew, and it took several days and sometimes weeks to get a building back up with power and air conditioning and ensuring that the building was safe. So, during this time, employees were either not working or, we had to set up VPN. There were folks that had to send tickets in to get IT support just to get their work done. So again, imagine if Office 365 is in place in this case, you could be having team meetings on Skype. The files could be shared on OneDrive. Your notes could be sent via SharePoint and so on. So as one more use case, I'm going to talk about citizen safety, in particular our CJ Leads program. CJ Leads is the Criminal Justice Law Enforcement Automated Data Service. It's a secure, centralized database of up-to-date information about offenders for use by state and local government criminal justice professionals. So it aggregates data sets from about 14 different sources in 5 agencies, so DPS, county jails, wildlife, and others. And it provides a comprehensive view of an offender through an image. There's also a kind of a cool watch list feature, so if something's changed with the status of an offender, an officer or a criminal justice professional can be notified. I think that's probably one of the most popular features, this quote, for example, using this watch list, I get instant notifications right to my phone when people I'm looking for have been arrested. And we'll soon be evolving this program for social workers as well. Now, the application itself today, that aggregates all of this data, is not fully responsive, but that's where we're going with an HTML5 wrapper. And I think this, just to me, really underscores that it's not just about usability and ease of use, but in this case, for these professionals, these criminal justice professionals, it's really a life or death issue. This one life saved is worth the effort of optimizing for mobile.
Thanks, Billy. So just in closing from the North Carolina side, the digital transformation is one of our extremely important priorities and initiatives. And Billy talked about the O365 ecosystem. And when we really start to think about and broaden out that strategy that we have around digital, we're in the midst of mobile device management and really enabling more of a BYOD policy and environment for the state of North Carolina. So we have a long way to go, but we're very excited with the progress we've made in the last few years. So that concludes our part, Jake.
That was awesome. Billy, Keith, thank you so much for sharing your experiences in the great state of North Carolina. It's been awesome to see the work you've done with Digital Commons. It's actually amazing. I mean, I sat down with you guys in July of 2015 to go through Digital Commons. It's super cool to see how it's changed and evolved and gotten better and more exciting since. And even more exciting to see other states following your and other states' leads. So that's really cool. Hopefully after today, more folks will walk away with that valuable inspiration. I want to turn now to Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen, you've seen a lot in this space. You and I have talked about that a bunch, and talked more recently in the podcast that's in the resource library here on the console for you attendees at home or in the office or wherever you are. Yes, we have. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about how states can mobilize the government workforce?
Yes. And before I begin on that subject, I would like to thank Suzanne, Keith, and Billy for sharing your experiences. I think it's been very informative. Now, from the Dow point of view, we look at mobility takes on many forms. Whether it's smartphones, laptops, tablets, the associated infrastructure, security, and applications, what we see is when government is evaluating mobility programs, it must also look at a variety of issues: governance, budget, what applications can be upgraded and supported for mobility, device management. And as one CIO in a conversation I recently had, he said you also have to look at the culture of your organization. What I found most has been demonstrated here by my fellow participants is the true success is the first and foremost is understanding the focus and the mission of the agency where mobility will be deployed. What I see it is the intersection of information technology and operational technology. How will the mobility help further the mission along with improving efficiency and productivity? Some of the key agencies where I have seen it be very effective, and it's been demonstrated today, are public safety, public works, and human services. It has improved efficiency for caseworkers and the human services environment by enabling them to focus on those they serve by decreasing the amount of time in travel work. In public works, we have seen cost savings and efficiency, enhanced decision-making so that they can look where to best deploy resources. In public safety, it's a better use of time, jurisdictional collaboration. I think that was demonstrated today. And really, you're just enhancing the overall public safety environment. And one thing I see we've had some focus today on public safety. One of the things I have learned in my years of experience as it relates to first responders, giving them that mobility is really key because it's not what you do. It's how I get this clear, but it's that what you don't know will kill you. Having timely information is really critical when you're a first responder. When we look at firefighters going out to chemical fires, knowing what chemicals are in that building, being able to access that. Again, it's what they don't know that can really hurt them. So in addition, we also see the deployment of teleworking. we're seeing that as a tool to attract and retain employees. And as an aside, I thought was very interesting in doing some research for this, as the beginnings of teleworking have actually been attributed to the federal government. Back in the 1970s during the OPEC oil crisis, and this is according to an article by Beth Bracco-Herring, it was led by Jack Niles. While working on a project for the Air Force in Nassau, he deployed a project using 30 employees. And I think today we see anywhere, there's different statistics. 1 out of 5 workers are doing teleworking, and in some studies you'll read out of as many as 40 to 50%. When we get to the core of the mobility, though, what we really want to look at are there are two things that we see. The people that are mobile, actually, the people and the data. The staff have their end-user devices, whether it's supplied by the governmental entity or is supplied by the individual necessary to do their job. The data is also mobile. It's no longer locked in a device or in a secure environment, nor really should it be. The data needs to be delivered into the hands of the people who can act on it when and where they need to. And it also has to be in a secure, managed, reliable environment. Slides going here. Also what we're seeing, and I think that's been demonstrated earlier by Suzanne, the way people work is changing. In my opinion, this is driven by such factors as the consumerization of IT. In a study that was conducted in October, I wouldn't say recent, but in 2015 by Pew Research on device ownership, it's been determined that 68% of the U.S. adults have smartphones, 45% of the adults have tablets, and 92% have cell phones, which includes smartphones. Now we have our tools that we not only use in our personal life, but we really expect that that's going to carry over into our work life. There are also other cultural implications. Work is no longer viewed as an activity. It is viewed as an activity, not just a location. And we also see as work is no longer a 9-to-5 activity. I think even in government, the people that you're serving, it's not a 9-to-5 job. When you're looking at, again, first responders, you're looking at human services, you're looking at public works. I'm sitting here looking out at the snow. It started to fall 2 nights ago. The public works were out here at 10 o'clock at night. So it isn't anymore. It's not just a 9-to-5 environment. So when you deploy mobility, you see, again, some industry statistics, 41% are more productivity, 41% more efficient, and 22% better responsiveness, and, of course, better collaboration. The key takeaway, though, when we look at all this is one size does not fit all. Not every, when you look at the whole ecosystem, so that's one of the key things, the takeaway for folks is that you can't address everything with the same solution. What we look at when we look at this is the 3 things we think are important. What we really see is that mobility creates an environment of empowerment. It also includes creating and enhancing collaboration. It helps make better decision making. But also, when we look at the benefits of mobility, there also are numerous concerns. As much as we want to think this is all pie in the sky and it's really simple, I think those that look at are taking care of the technology on a day-to-day basis realize it's not that simple. In most cases, the best approach we see is to take a holistic view of all aspects as it relates to the complexity, the risks, and the associated costs that will enable a successful strategy that addresses both the needs of the workforce, the citizens, the business requirements, and the IT requirements. As the end result of a successful program, as we saw demonstrated today, is that really what has happened is when we look at the state of Michigan, the state of North Carolina, and some other states that we've seen out there. What we really have done is they've empowered the workforce. They've driven the mission of the agency, whether it was the state police, whether it's human services, whether it's human resources. And also in the end, what happens is you're enabling your workforce to have control and also develop innovation. I think that's another key, especially moving forward as more and more devices. I think Suzanne noted that earlier. She said, I think she has 3 devices. What we're seeing out there in the anticipation of more devices that in the next 15 years, there will be about 200 billion devices, 25% the number of people. So that's going to take on a whole different aspect as we move forward. To sum it up, mobilizing the workforce and the momentum continues to transform government, accelerate collaboration, and will extend the enterprise for the governmental entity. And most importantly, it enhances the quality of life for those that the government serves. So with that, I will turn it over to Jake.
Marilyn, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing those best practices with us, and always love hearing Dell EMC's perspective. And again, thanks again to Suzanne, Keith, and Billy for their great presentations. We have some questions here from our fantastic audience. So we have a question here from Natalie. She's with DocuSign, and this was actually asked during Suzanne's presentation, but I want to modify it so that we can apply it to all of our participants today. So Natalie asks, what kind of mobile devices are used? Are device types standardized, for example, 1 or 2 device types, or are multiple device types used? This question, again, was specifically asked about the public safety point that Suzanne was asking for. So Suzanne, do you want to answer that, and then we'll broaden it for the rest of the group?
Yeah, absolutely. So specifically state-issued devices, there are standard devices that are you're able to select from. So for the most part, we are either iOS or Android. I think there might be a few Windows phones roaming around, but for the most part, MDM that we support it on iOS and Android devices. I will say specifically related to the public service side of it, so MSP and those teams over there, they have very specific equipment that they use because it's really important for them all to have kind of very, very standardized equipment. It all kind of works over, kind of one radio system and things like that. So I think they might be a little more standardized than, say, all state agencies within Michigan. We do have the ability to kind of pick and choose depending on if you're an Android or an iOS person. And for those of us who use our smartphones 24/7, you do kind of pick one and you're kind of with it for life. I'm an iOS fangirl for life, I think.
Me too, don't worry. Thank you so much, Suzanne. And Keith and Billy, whichever one of you wants to take this one, what kind of mobile devices are you seeing employees using in North Carolina, and are you standardizing those devices at all across your enterprise?
We're seeing all kinds of devices, and there's really not, iOS, Android, we're not really standardizing device types, and I think the direction, I'm coming at it from kind of the web perspective of, again, the responsive web perspective would be we should work on any device, any operating system, kind of anywhere, anytime. So looking even further down the road as we move beyond mobile devices, thinking about Internet of Things, and had a conversation earlier today about, it's the holidays now, right? A lot of Christmas presents will be these new voice devices, and I think we all know the brands and kind of what's hot right now. Imagine, down the road when we're going to be, delivering content out of a screen and into that kind of mobile device, because we need to be factoring those in too. So I think getting a little bit away from specific device types is probably the way to go.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great point. And I know that I find myself on a variety of devices all day, whether it's my tablet, my phone, sometimes my watch, all kinds of things. So I think that's key to make sure that things are responsive and usable across many different devices. So we have one more question here, and I want to remind our audience that you can go down to the Q&A box at the bottom of your console and ask questions at any time. But for now, we have one more. During your presentation, Keith and Billy, you both mentioned your mobile first policy. I want to ask you, how are you getting? But how did you get to mobile first in North Carolina? How did you have that conversation, and what do states need to do to get themselves to mobile first?
That's a great question, and it is one of those buzzwords that has been thrown around for years, and it's as much about a culture change and really bringing the right people together beyond even IT and comms. But as I look back at the beginning of our Digital Commons program, we along with our vendors went through kind of a deep dive process. So instead of going straight to kind of site development for mobile or otherwise, we really took it from the top. Why are we delivering these? What is the purpose of the website we're creating for this agency? Who are the audiences? We did a lot of persona and archetype user work to really understand the needs of the users, who's coming, and out of that sprung forth information and data that really spoke to a mobile context. So that process, that discovery process and the deep dive, that sort of was building blocks. We start with the personas, then you do the information architecture and the site diagrams, and I think that process was key. It adds length to a project. We were from a maturity standpoint. I think that was vital to bring stakeholders really kind of up the chain and down to understand the process necessary to get to that mobile first approach. I think now it would be much more compressed for a project, but I would say that was key. Keith, anything you want to add there?
No, I think the executive understanding of how mobile devices are used now is pretty prevalent. So I think the sell part of it is pretty easy. And like I said before, I think the administration recognized that very early, and Billy and his team really kind of attached to that vision. So it was a very good project, and Billy's done a very good job with it.
And actually, Mary Ellen, I want to pitch that to you. You talk about a lot about how Dell EMC is helping folks mobilize the workforce. But when you're having conversations like I know we do with state and local folks across the country, how are you getting them to mobile first, and what are you telling them that they need to know about getting to a more mobile way of thinking?
Well, I think again, there's a lot of issues as we talked about. It's when you're talking about mobile first, it's about making sure you have the infrastructure in place to do it. And a lot of times, what we're seeing out there, and it has to do with, do they have the budget? It's when we're going, I think, Keith, you mentioned digital transformation. Well, it's just not that simple. I mean, you have these legacy applications that aren't sometimes you just can't take them and make them mobile. So we really think that's one of the first steps, is to assess what the applications that you want to make mobile, and do you have the budget, and how easily is it to make that happen. So we think that's one of the first steps. And also the other issue that's out there when you're looking at mobility is talking to them about security. When we look at government agencies, when we're dealing in, for instance, public safety, you're dealing in human services, you're dealing with some confidential information, for instance, in human services, HIPAA. How are we making sure that's secure? And it's not just, securing it from the standpoint of where it's stored, things like that. It's simple things like if I have a caseworker out there, making sure that you have the proper policies in place. I lose my mobile device, I lose my laptop. How does that what are the processes in place to take care of that, so we make sure that things are shut off immediately so people don't have access. So that's just some of the things that we like to talk about, making sure the infrastructure and the security is in place.
That's a great response. And hold on to that thought on security, because I have a follow-up question on that. But first I want to go to Suzanne, and I want to talk to Suzanne. Suzanne, when you're having conversations across Michigan, I know that you talked about how, sort of the governor's mandate and the governor's impetus that sort of brought you to this point where you're trying to get everything responsive, everything on the same device so that you can, display project, process and all of that. But how are you having the conversations internally to get your state to think more about mobile?
That's a great question. I think a lot of it is there's so much data out there around mobility that it becomes an easier conversation when you can point to statistics and you can actually show them facts, and it's not just I think it should be mobile because it should work. It's people have an expectation and a need that when they bring up a website or an application on their mobile device that it's going to render correctly, and they need it to, especially as Mary Ellen was saying, if you're in a situation where you're dealing with, something going on in public health or something like that, they have to have that information available to them and readily available. So the conversations start to become easier if you can put it into the context of how it helps that particular agency do some work. It also helps if you can find ways to accelerate that development so that it is not so costly and time-consuming. So, one of the things that we've done, we have a mobile-first strategy as well. And so when new projects come along, it's not a question of if it's mobile. It will be responsive, at the very least, mobile responsive. We've built responsive templates. And all of our development teams and our vendors have access to those templates so that it's kind of like a kickstart, right? You're not starting from ground zero. So it kind of helps you kind of sort of start with a framework that'll get you at least some way towards being where you need to be. So we really have been focusing on the facts, making sure that people understand how it's helpful to them and what the benefits are to them, and then also trying to really accelerate that development so that they don't see it as a hindrance but as a benefit.
Hey, this is Billy from North Carolina. Just to kind of piggyback and echo those comments, we also have created a living style guide. It's actually at digitalstyle.nc.gov, just to recognize that there are some instances where an application or a site just didn't align with the platform. We wanted to make sure that the responsive templates were available. So it's a living thing that's changing over time as we see our needs change.
That's awesome. Thank you both for that. I think it says a lot about me and a lot about our audience here that I got super excited when you said style guide. I think that was awesome and really exciting. So I'm glad that you guys have that, and it's really cool to see that sort of. Style guides have always existed for designers and folks in design across state government, but it's cool to see that kind of taking the minds of digital commons and how things are going to look online for government services. So that's really cool. So I want to go back to a point that Mary Ellen made, and actually, Suzanne, you touched on it as well, and that was, I know we have people on the line here watching the webinar who are interested in public health and are interested in health and human services technology, and you mentioned HIPAA, Mary Ellen, and with that comes a huge security concern. Obviously, the common answer to how are you thinking about cybersecurity when it comes to mobility is that, we're baking it in from the start, but obviously that's not so easy when you have things like BYOD. So maybe what are the top one or two concerns when it comes to cyber and ways that states and localities can address those? What are some of those top two concerns and solutions, Mary Ellen, and how do you see states moving past them into the new mobile future? Okay, I don't hear Mary Ellen, so I'm going to go take that question back to you.
I made the ultimate mistake, Jake. I put myself on mute.
Oh, no worries. Do you need me to repeat the question, or do you want to go for it?
Yeah, we should probably repeat the question.
No worries. So it's good. This will give me a better chance to ask it a better way. How do you need to? What are some of the top two or three concerns that states and localities have when it comes to cybersecurity on mobile that go beyond just baking cybersecurity in from the beginning, but really what are some of those challenges and then solutions to those challenges in order to move states and localities into a new mobile future?
Well, I think as I stated earlier, I think it's just not about baking this cybersecurity into the infrastructure. I think a lot of it's policy and governance, too. What are the policies established, especially when you're getting into mobile device management and bring your own devices? How do we make sure that people are following the policies and securing those devices? If I'm using BYOD, we have BYOD deployed, and somebody takes my phone and uses it. I mean, how secure is that? So again, I think a lot of it, what we're seeing is policy and establishing the proper policies, governance, and mobile device management.
And Keith, I think here in North Carolina it's similar. I mean, policy and governance, and I think frankly this is something with the state we're working on, and it's a big challenge for us. We're working close with our security office, and this is a huge factor for kind of delivering these services and resources with the security realities we face. So, we would agree.
And Suzanne, same question to you, cybersecurity.
Yeah, absolutely, to echo what Mary Ellen and Keith were saying, that it's definitely kind of a multi-pronged approach to it, specifically around the health and human services. We have an application, it wasn't in my use cases, but it's called MySecWis Mobile. And I think MySecWis is actually an application that's across multiple states, but it's used by our Child Protective Services workers. And what we actually did was developed a custom downloadable application that goes on the social workers' phones, so that when they're out in the field, they can actually upload pictures, they can upload case notes. And so securing that's really important, right, because the information that you're putting in there is related to children. So it's obviously very important to protect that data. So those phones are managed by the state. For the most part, there are some contract workers that we do something a little different with them, without going too far into the technical weeds on that one. But so if they lose their phone, we wipe it. We do require that they use the state's identity management system. So that is an enterprise system that has all of the FedRAMP and fun acronyms kind of wrapped around that to make sure that it's compliant. But then, understanding when you need to do step-up authentication, when it's not just enough to put in a username and password, but now we're asking them to do multi-factor. And then, making sure that that is still usable to a worker who's trying to get into that system and, be efficient with their work. So, it's actually looking at it from multiple perspectives of, is the device secure? Is the person accessing it supposed to be accessing it? And how do we confirm that? So it's really looking at the process and policies around that and making sure that, depending on the classification of the data that's on there, of implementing the correct policies.
Perfect. That's outstanding. So one more question for you guys, and again, we're nearing the end of our program here, but I want to give the audience one more chance to ask a question. And again, it's right down at the bottom of your console there. You can ask a Q&A box, and you can ask a question. But my last question for you guys, the title of this webinar is Mobilizing the Workforce. And we talked a lot about the mobility part, and we talked a lot about how it impacts the workforce. But let's talk about the workforce thing. Mary Ellen, you and I on our podcast talked a lot about how a good mobile platform is a great way to attract a new workforce to state government. So how do you guys see, and Mary Ellen, we will start with you, how do you see mobility and good mobile device management and good mobile platforms across the board as a really great way to attract and retain talent in state government?
Well, as I noted in my remarks earlier, that the way work is viewed is changing, and when we look at the Gen Xers and the millennials, they've grown up. I often refer to, I guess would be the millennials, as the Nintendo generation. They've had devices from the beginning, so they expect these technologies, and they expect that they can access information and anytime, anywhere, any place. And I think they want to carry that over into their work life. So I think that's a key to making sure that those technology. I think they just expect that that's going to be there. And also the work environment. And Suzanne, I think it might be Michigan, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're also looking at changing the way, I think you have one building now that you're making, you don't have cubicles and stuff anymore. I think I was up there recently. So even not just the, giving the technology, but even the environment. So we're starting to see that, I don't have to sit at my desk. I don't have to sit. I have these group think rooms, things like that. So I think mobility definitely is what is anticipated by the next generation. And hey, even my generation, I think we're getting used to having it. And the work, when we look at what kind of jobs we want to do, do I really want to drive to an office versus telecommuting? So with that, I guess we'll turn it over to Suzanne. And I guess, am I right about the Michigan thing?
You are. So we call them collaboration spaces.
Collaboration
actually, yeah, actually within the building that I'm in downtown Lansing. So right now I'm in my office because I needed to call in on a landline, and I can tell you that to kind of illustrate the point, the landline that is in my quote office, I don't even know the phone number to, because what is published for my contact information is my cell phone. So I actually had to think about it for a second and go, I think there's a landline in my office. Let me go check and see if it's actually there, because that's how often it gets used. But yeah, we do have collaboration spaces, and actually that's where I am most of the time. So, I have kind of multiple teams that report in, and I find that if you're kind of in an office with a door on it most of the time, you're just kind of segregated. You don't hear what's going on. People don't see you. So I actually sit in our collaboration space, like I would say 98% of the time, so that people come in, they can ask questions. Everybody that's around me can hear the answers. So it's really kind of a way to have transparency and open communication and get better ideas. And to take it a step further, the MDM and the mobility, I think, is key to recruitment and retention. We have kind of a whole different set of people coming into the workforce with expectations. They grew up never without the internet, and so they're just used to that, and they're used to being able to get their information anywhere, anytime, and on any device. So things like collaboration spaces, things like remote locations. We have one of our developers on our team actually is remote 100% of the time. He works out of Marquette, Michigan. And so, we use things like Slack and Skype for Business and obviously texting and to communicate, video chats. So it is it's turning into a different world, but it's pretty cool, and there's a lot of neat technology out there that really helps to enable that and make it beneficial for everyone involved.
That's awesome, Suzanne. Thank you for that. I think it's, the telecommuting and how technology has really enabled that. I know we've even seen that a lot internally here. Earlier this year, Scoop News Group opened an office on the West Coast, and we have now 3 or 4 employees out there that we communicate almost exclusively with online, and that's a really cool way. And to be able to use platforms like Slack and Skype for Business, like you said, really cool ways to keep in touch and get the job done nice and easy. Billy and Keith, just want to take that question to you. I mean, and I know you guys are doing a lot with the iCenter, how are you using mobility as a way to attract and retain a really good and young and excited workforce?
Sure. I mean, similar themes here in North Carolina. I just, as someone who's managed multiple students and young people from our community colleges and universities around here, it's been remarkable and not surprising just how much when I asked what was interesting to you about this opportunity, there was some of the kind of usual answers, but also, hey, I was checking out the site and there was a video about the iCenter, or it just sounded like you guys are doing things that are a little bit different than what I expected with state government, and we almost use that as a selling tool of not just mobile, we're optimizing for mobile, or we're changing the culture here. We're creating a more sort of innovative ethos that is attractive to them. I think, I love the conversation about kind of workspace design, and I've actually just recently moved to a new building where we're trying to bring in some of the collaborative open areas for the reasons that were just described. It's also interesting that, you've got this new generation who, when we talk about millennials, there's really, of course, different ages and values even within that demographic, and balancing those needs. And those of us that love to be on Slack, for example, like my team, with state workers who that's unfamiliar and really don't want an open space where you can. And we've got all of that in the same buildings, and I think that's where it gets kind of exciting and fun. Of all right, that's the challenge. Let's meet the needs of both, and try to create a organizational culture that is not only focused on who's coming, but really creating a great environment for those who have contributed for many years.
Yeah, that was great. Billy. Thank you for that, and always cool to hear that you guys are working on more unique workspaces in North Carolina. It means I have to come back down and see it. So, Suzanne, Billy, Keith, Mary Ellen, I'm afraid we're going to have to end it here, but thank you so much for sharing some of these essential lessons that you and your organizations and teams have learned. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jake. Thanks, StateScoop.
Thank you, Jake, and thanks to the team for participating today.
Absolutely, and thank you guys again. I want to thank our audience once again for tuning in today to our Government Technology webinar series here on StateScoop. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank Dell EMC for sponsoring today's program. Just a reminder, our program today will be available on demand approximately 1 day after the webcast, and it will remain available for up to 90 days. You can access it and download a PDF copy of the slides from the resource list on your console using the same audience link that was emailed to you earlier. Please invite your colleagues to tune in. It's free and hopefully good, valuable content. All they need to do is fill out a brief registration card to view the entire program and also get access to the slides and access to the links and the resources that we talked about during today's edition of the webinar. Look for more coverage on mobility and all of our other state and local government coverage at statescoop.com. And on behalf of all of us here at StateScoop, this is Jake Williams, Manager of Strategic Initiatives. Thanks again for being with us.